Bigfoot killed and, I think, ate my dog. Hello, my name is Jerry K., and I live off of I-5 in the midsection of Oregon on the west side. I'm about 15 miles south of Eugene. The surrounding area is all trees. The majority are tall pines. My house sits back off the road a little ways, which acts to isolate us much more than we would be if our house was closer to the blacktop road. Having a German Shepherd dog helped ease the feelings of isolation because Skip was very protective of the property. When he was around, you had no worries about anything, or anyone, sneaking up on you. Skip was as good a guard dog as anyone could have ever desired. We got him the same time we moved into this place. He came as a pup and was literally like our child. I truthfully don't know how we are going to move forward without him, or I felt that way. We just recently got some outstanding news that Jeannie is pregnant. Call it coincidence, you can say that it is true that whenever a door is closed that God opens up a window. Whatever the case, both myself and my wife are as optimistic as possible that we have turned a corner in our life. That's quite a corner because things had been about as bad as they could get. Skip did everything with us. He went on all the trips to the beach, he went on all the hikes. He never even missed a quick ride down to the quick stop store. At the time we had given up on having children, so Skip was our child. Again, I cannot express how saddened we were when he was taken from us. It was early spring in 2020 and basically everyone was staying at home because of COVID. Skipper and I had been out by the barn feeding the chickens when we heard the strangest animal call. Both of us perked up at the sound because it was deep, sounding like it came from a bear. A big bear. It also might have been a mountain lion. I just could not place it, but I would know it again in a second if I heard it. After everything that happened, I'm sure it was the Sasquatch, because what else could it have been? I should have suspected it was something different than the usual suspects because damn it, I know the usual noises. I should have recognized that this was something unusual. I won't lie, it sounded hungry. The barn is about 30 paces from the back door of our house, and back behind it is where we feed the chickens. Surrounding the place is a forest line, which as soon as you reach it there is nothing but more trees for quite a distance in any direction on our side of the road. We heard that terrible wail or roar again when we came around the corner of the barn. There must have been at least two of them because the growl was far closer than the wail. The growl came from the edge of the forest a little ways ahead of us. There was definitely something there, and it was basically between us and the house, or at least it was in a position where whatever it was, would have little trouble cutting us off at the pass, so to speak, if we tried to get to the house. Understand, the growl was very close, and sounded very, very menacing. So much so that when it growled my body just did an instant 180, grabbing Skip by the collar, and I dragged him back around the corner of the barn. Now we're standing along the side of the barn, and keep in mind the chickens are kept alongside the back wall of the barn in nests which are high enough off the ground nothing can get to them. You can gather the eggs by entering the barn, and their nests open up to the inside of the barn, allowing the eggs to be taken. We had been along the side of the barn about 5 minutes when the commotion started. Frankly, I was afraid of the animal growling being able to cut off our retreat, and there wasn't really any other direction which we could go that would have ended in our benefit. To deal with whatever it was that was growling at us, I needed to reach the house so I could arm myself. I stood there blocked by the corner of the barn from whatever was waiting for us, contemplating whether to risk peeking my head around that corner to see what was up. Holding on to Skip and keeping him from being seen when I peeked around the corner was going to be incredibly hard. He had already begun to buck against my holding his collar. He wanted to go see what it was that had sent me back around the barn corner so fast. I admired his courage but cursed his excitement. The thing was that I had to have a look around that corner, and soon. The very last thing I wanted was for a predator to come around the corner of the barn and have us out in the open with no good plan of action. It was paramount I have a look around the corner of the barn. It wasn't proving easy, holding Skip as far away from the corner of the building as possible while getting myself inched up as close to the barn as possible, and then moving toward that corner for a quick peek. Then I heard it again. It was definitely still somewhere around that corner of the barn. Could it be smart enough to have moved up along the front side of the barn and then inched towards the corner? So that it would be in a perfect position to ambush me if I was stupid enough to peek my head around that corner? I slowly moved my head as far out beyond my body as could reach, and then I stopped. There was an odor. A horrible odor. Only it was coming from the backside of the barn, not the front. The chickens were suddenly going ape crazy. Next I heard the sound of wood being ripped from wood. I imagined it was the nests being ripped off the back of the barn. What else could it be that would be making the chickens go so crazy? Again I heard that menacing growl, only it was coming from the front side of the barn. So what was at the back? Were there two of them? I was running out of time to do something. Since I was just a quick poke of my head from being able to see what it was that was growling in front of the barn, I rolled the dice. As fast as possible I jutted my head further out away from the barn so I could see the front side. Nothing. Quickly I turned my attention to what was behind the barn to make sure it wasn't coming around the back corner after us. I could hear it tearing the wood from itself as the creature was ripping its way through the constructed nests to get at the chickens. I bolted for the house and tried to bring Skip with me, but he wouldn't come along. I had to make a choice. Stay there and keep Skip from being able to engage with what was behind the barn, or go for my rifle. I'll be honest. Never was I so angry with my dog as that moment. Yet at the same time, now that I have a few seconds to reflect, his only fault was his courage. A brave dog will take on anything that threatens the things it is charged with protecting. Skip could hear the chickens squawking, sounded like screams to me. Skipper made one final lunge against my hold and the collar broke. I knew there was no chance of holding the dog without the collar, so I didn't even try to catch him as he charged for the backside of the barn. As Skip raced to battle the beast that was killing our chickens, so I did run as fast as possible for my rifle. I don't know if you have ever been in a situation where someone you love is in harm's way and you must either physically race, or perhaps you were in a vehicle. Either way, you have this surreal time that your mind has to think of all these scenarios as your body takes you to where you need to be. When I reached the house, I nearly broke the door off the hinges getting it open so I could run inside and grab my rifle. If you are a rancher, farmer, somebody who lives out in the sticks, maybe off by yourself, if you are smart, you have protection there on hand, with ample ammunition, and just as importantly as having those items is having them in a designated location where the ammunition is very available to an adult needing it. A lot of people keep their ammo separate from their weapons in a lockbox. They have to get into their gun closet usually by unlocking it after finding the key. Then they pull out an ammo box which is separately locked. In some cases the people keep the ammo in a lockbox which is locked in a drawer at the bottom or top of their gun closet. That is a lot of crap to get through when your kid is racing to fight a bear, or as I found out later, something even worse. By the way, for those folks who struggle with the decision of whether to keep your ammo loaded in your gun or whether to keep the ammo separate, that keeping my guns unloaded was not the reason we lost Skip. Again, I experienced that surreal time that your brain has to think of literally every worst-case scenario possible as your body hurtles you toward whatever danger awaits. A danger you give almost zero consideration as to what you're racing into because all you can think about is that your loved one is already in the mix. I won't lie, it took freaking forever to reach the back corner of that barn, and then suddenly I was upon it and my fear for Skip overcame any thought towards self-preservation. I rushed around that corner ready to fight Custer's last stand by myself if necessary, but I wasn't ready for what I saw when I came busting into the scene. Keep in mind it was early spring and there was still snow on the ground. Temperatures were still brisk in the mornings. The sun was bright and there was only the slightest of breezes. So when I came around the corner of the barn, I was met with the sight of two huge, hairy creatures that were breathing what gave the appearance of fire the way the steam was coming out of their heaving chests as they snarled and growled at both Skip and then at myself when they saw me come around that corner. Even though these things meant to do us, well, I figured they would hurt me as easily as they would Skipper, that they meant to do us harm. Both big beasts held a dead chicken in one hand and the other hand was free to do as much damage as was possible. Well, even though I viewed the matter as an absolute matter of self-defense and protecting a person's private property, not to mention their loved one, that I hesitated to point a rifle at something so human-like. Yes, I hesitated, and then I brought the weapon up to an aiming and firing position with the business end pointed directly at one of the two big beasts. The other one, the one I did not have the gun pointed toward, let go a roar that almost knocked the gun out of my shaking hands. Keep in mind while all this is happening that Skipper is going apeshit crazy, barking and snarling and jumping up at the big beasts, which are so towering that I doubt the dog was able to get high enough to bite them in the chest area. The other beast, which was farther away, let go that ear-deafening roar as I raised my rifle while Skipper's jumps are blocking my chance to get a shot off at the beast without risking hitting the dog. Then that blood-curdling roar happened, and in all the chaos I ended up not firing the gun. The beast closest to me reached out and knocked Skip back into me when he had jumped. The creature's timing was perfect and it flung Skip into me, knocking me down and the gun out of my hand. I stayed completely focused on the rifle, where it had went in connection to where I was going to land. I hit the ground rolling toward the rifle and recovered it in what must not have been more than 2 seconds. However, in that very brief time span plus the split second or two it took me to regain my composure enough to be able to fire the rifle again, the creatures were gone. Disappeared into the bright, crystal clear daylight. They covered the 30 or more feet to the forest line in literally 2 bounds, or so I imagined. Truth is that even though I recovered in what seemed to me to be nearly superhero-type speed, that the creatures were literally out of my sight by the time I had regained composure. This was a most confusing circumstance because, as I have mentioned, they should not have been able to get away without my at least getting off one shot in their direction. Yet that was not what happened. They made me look like a fool city slicker out in the country with his daddy's hand-me-down rifle that he had never actually fired but that I thought made me a man. The beasts accomplished destroying any thoughts I had of being able to protect me and mine. So they embarrassed me. I could have lived with them getting away with that and been happy to tell the next person that asked that these creatures were okay. Despite having our disagreements, that I had no reasonable cause to say that the only good one is a dead one, but let me tell you how things ended. That night Skip wanted out to go do his usual business. There was no reason to think the creatures had come back around. There was no sign at all that they had returned. None of that wood smacking against wood. No blood-curdling screams or roars. I even heard them what I imagine is their version of communication while everything was happening that morning. But I didn't hear any of it when the night fell. It seemed like everything was just as normal as possible, though now that I am sitting here saying this it occurs to me that the insects had not been singing. Why didn't I pick up on it? Well, truth is I know why. We were so emotionally exhausted that our guard was not up. Hell, I don't think it was even on. That changed quickly once Skip didn't come back in a timely fashion. At first I called for him and he wasn't anywhere to be found, so I got dressed and grabbed a flashlight and my rifle. I took some duct tape and used it to secure the flashlight so it was pointed in the same direction as the gun sights. If I did need to use the weapon, the last thing I wanted to be worrying about was keeping my light pointed at the thing I was pointing my gun. They needed to work in tandem. Once again the temperatures were cold enough that you could see your breath when exhaling. It was one of those nights when you got a lot of fog out of your lungs when you exhaled. If you did it with vigor you would need to step to one side to be able to see past the cloud formed. Since I was already breathing pretty hard from the anxiety, it only added to the drama of being out there in the complete darkness with only a flashlight and my rifle. I kept having to step to one side to see past my own exhale, and every time I did, there was concern that when I would be able to see again that I would be looking at the belly button of a 10-foot-tall hairy beast ready to take my head off. Suddenly I heard something exhale hard. You could hear the air being pushed out of a pair of mighty lungs. I began to go in that direction while keeping my flashlight aimed ahead of me. There was blood. At first just a little, but then there was what looked like an explosion of red. Then I saw him. The part they didn't take with them. It was one of his front legs, part of his torso, and then the back leg. All on that same side. If I had to guess, I would say the bastards took Skip by the legs and literally pulled him apart. They took the bulk of the meat and left the short side of the wishbone for me to find. I will kill them if I ever get the chance. I don't care what laws there are, and I don't care who doesn't like it. Maybe not all of them are the way that these two beasts acted. I don't know. What I do know is that they must have followed us home and then waited patiently until darkness. Until our Skip went out to do his business. They grabbed him and you know the rest. Maybe someday. after our child is born and we have had some time to gain perspective, that I will be able to forgive the beasts. Accept that they were acting as they were put in this world to do, and that Skip and his parents were just victims of bad luck, timing, and choice of locations. Maybe someday. If I were them, I wouldn't come around my reach anytime soon. Thank you for visiting. Please subscribe for more stories from at safe distance.